Okay, 4.2, we're solving systems algebraically. To do that, we sometimes have to mess with our equations to make sure that they're solved for one variable first, and then we can solve for the other. We will mostly be using the method of substitution in order to get an equation with one variable to solve. So, for example, we have 2x plus y equals 2, and y equals the quantity x minus 1 squared plus 1. Now, we have one equation that is in terms of y, meaning, or that is solved for y. So we are going to take what's over here and replace y with that. So when we do that, we get 2x plus, still always use parentheses. So I'm putting my whole expression in parentheses. So x minus 1 squared plus 1, close parentheses, equals 2. Now once we do that, 2x plus, I'm going to focus on this first. So x minus 1 squared, I could write that out as x minus 1 times x minus 1. And then we would take x times x, which is x squared, x times negative 1, so negative 1x, negative 1 times x, negative 1x, and negative 1 times negative 1 is a positive 1. Then we had that plus 1 equals 2. Now we're going to go through and combine like terms. So I see I have 2x and negative 1x, negative 1x. Well, those are going to end up canceling each other. We then get x squared, 1 plus 1 is 2. So plus 2 equals 2. Now we can solve. Subtract 2 on both sides. X squared equals 0. Well, even if I take the square root of that, oops. Even if I take the square root of that, we still get x equals 0. And I don't need a positive or negative because still 0. So this was our solving for x. So now we have to solve for y. And you're going to pick one of your equations. I'm going to pick equation 2 because it's already has y isolated. So this is the step where I solve for y. So I'm going to take y equals, wherever I see an x in that equation, so I'm using this one, wherever I see an x, I'm going to replace it with 0. So 0 minus 1 squared plus 1. And now we simplify. Well, 0 minus 1 is still negative 1 squared plus 1. And then y equals negative 1 squared is 1, and 1 plus 1 is 2. So our solution is 0, 2. And remember, you can always check that in your calculator by graphing it. So let's try this one. What are we going to replace y with? Good, we're going to replace y with that because it's already a solved for y. So y equals, whoops, scratch that, replacing y. So parentheses, x squared plus x plus 4 plus 6 equals 2x squared. Okay. Now nothing's going to happen to those within those parentheses, so we can drop them and combine like terms. So I can combine those negative x squared plus x plus 10 equals 2x squared. So now I want to get all of my x's on the same side. So I'm going to move my 2x squared just because there's less on that same side with it. So then we get negative 3x squared plus x plus 10 equals 0. Now, there's a couple different ways we can go about solving this. We can factor, we can use the quadratic formula. However, before I do any of that, I do not want my leading coefficient, that negative 3, or that negative 3. I don't want it to be negative. So I'm actually going to divide everything by a negative 1. And when I do that, then everything just becomes an opposite sign. And 0 is still 0. So now, once again, you can use whatever way. You can factor or quadratic formula. I'm going to go the route of using my quadratic formula. So x equals negative b. So that would be a positive 1 plus or minus square root of negative 1 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 10, and that's all over 2 times 3. Calculator does most of the work for us. X equals negative 1 squared, minus 4 times 3 times negative 10. So we get 1 plus or minus the square root of 121 over 6. And then this breaks into two equations. X equals 1 plus the square root of 121 is 11 over 6, and x equals 1 minus 11 over 6. So this one equals 2. And this one equals, we would get negative 10 over 6, which is negative 5 over 3. So now we know what x is. We still have to find y. But we have two x's, so that means we're going to have two answers for y. I would use this first equation to find my answers because it's already solved for y. So I'm just going to copy this and move it down here so I have it again. So remember, when we're finding the solution for a system, you need an x and a y. So, sorry guys, my work is really messy. So when x equals 2 was one of our answers, and then when x equals negative 5 over 3. So y equals negative 2 squared, and notice my negative's not in the parentheses because it was already there. So just that 2 is in the parentheses. Plus 2 plus 4. And then y equals negative not in the parentheses. And then I do need a negative in the parentheses with that 5/3 because it was a negative 5/3. Plus negative 5/3 plus 4. Now you guys remember, use your calculator to your advantage. Negative 2 squared plus 2 plus 4. So we get y equals 2. So the answer here is 2, 2. For our other one, once again, using your calculator. So, whoops. Negative, parenthesis, our fraction, negative 5 over 3, close parenthesis, and that is squared plus parenthesis, fraction, negative 5 over 3 plus 4. So we get x is negative 5/3 and y is negative 4/9. So those are our solutions. So this is our part 1. We're going to take 2 days on this. You will have a part 2 video.